Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much. I guess it's afternoon now, 12 o'clock. But thank you all so much for joining us today for our town hall conversation on the climate change and the environment and how the environment impacts and contributes to the issues we're facing with climate change. Let me begin by introductions. First, I want to thank the ENOC for Congress campaign for sponsoring today's call. My name is Elaine Hansen, and I will be your moderator for this conversation. Dr. Vanessa Enoch is our host of today's town hall, and she is the CEO of Cultural Impact, a business management consulting firm based in Cincinnati. But her main focus is public policy and social change. And most importantly today, she is a candidate for Congress in the 8th District of Ohio. So I'm excited to have Vanessa with us. Our other three guests are Peggy Berry. Dr. Berry has been an environmental activist since 2010. Volunteers her time with state and organizations on clean air, water, methane new source rules, I don't know what those are, as well as fracking chemical transparency. She is a member and an environmental volunteer lobbyist for the Ohio League of Women Voters, and she speaks on the health effects of pollution. So I'm happy to have Peggy join us. We also have Tony Logan. Tony is a renewable energy and food systems consultant in Columbus, Ohio. He previously served as the USDA's Ohio Rural Development Director during the 2 terms of the Obama administration. He is also the chairperson of the Columbus and Franklin County Local Food Board and sits on the Vice President's Advisory Council for the Ohio State University's College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. Also, you may recognize him, was a guest on our town hall on fighting for family farms. Yep. So welcome, Tony. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And our third guest is Robert Park. Bob Park is a federal employee with a focus in public health on work-related illnesses and injuries. He has been an activist on progressive causes for 50 years and bringing a perspective on social class and political power. His current involvements include the Sierra Club and Ohio Citizen Action. So welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us. With that, I'd like to pass the mic to Vanessa and ask her to respond to the question why this conversation on environment and climate change is important to her. Thank you. Thank you. Just a few things to explain to our guests and also those watching, that as we move into the conversations, if I ask a question that you as a guest are not ready to answer or don't want to answer, maybe or don't have an answer to, uh, I invite you to simply pass. Because in this space, I invite you to speak when you feel moved to speak. Each question I have designed to last 10 to 15 minutes, which means each of you will have 3 to 5 minutes to respond to that question. So be sensitive to how long you're responding to leave space for everyone that wants to respond. The other thing is, those that are watching this today, I invite you to watch and listen, and as I ask the questions, reflect on what those questions mean to you. And if you have a question or a response you'd like to share, you can write that in the comments or in the chat box, whichever is available to you in your viewing perspective. And so let us begin. I want to talk first about the fact that I am a native from Southern Ohio. I've lived here all my life, except for college years. And I have noticed in my lifetime that the climate and environment have gone through a change here. I've also understood how our efforts and understanding of human contributions to climate change has increased. We have a greater awareness that Dr. Enoch talked about in her response before. But my memory includes improvements to our environment with the passage of the Clean Air Act in 1970 and the Clean Water Act in 1972. And an increased awareness of the need to do something after the fire on the Ohio River, the Love Canal, birth defects, those kinds of things and more, all in an effort to clean up and improve the environment. Sadly, with this current president and his administration, we have seen many of these positive actions reversed. Many governmental agencies tasked with protecting us and enforcing these laws and rules that have been put in place for the environment, that they have been hindered in fulfilling their obligation to the country, to the people. And so with that, I would like now to open up our first conversation, and I invite our guests to speak when they feel moved to speak. I'm curious to know, what is the conversation on the environment and climate change? Why is the conversation on the environment and climate change important to you and your work? And who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
This is Tony. I guess I can go
Okay.
first because this one's kind of easy. Climate change, if it's left unchecked, is an existential threat to humanity's survival on the planet. So there's that. But the fun part of the climate challenge is that there are so many opportunities to create successful business models and new income streams out of the many climate mitigation strategies and technologies that are now already on the shelf. And many of those technologies and strategies will end up being deployed in the small towns and rural areas of places like Southwest Ohio. In fact, there are already about a gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts of solar projects that are they're already approved and they're in the construction process. Most of those in Southwest Ohio. And if all of those go through the construction process without further delays, and there's always a chance of delays in Ohio. Someone just introduced a bill in the Ohio legislature to kill these solar projects, just like yesterday. Hopefully that won't go anywhere. But if those solar projects are completed and powered up, that will almost be as much as a coal plant, or be pretty much the same capacity as a coal plant, which hopefully we can take offline. And close to the amount of generating capacity for a nuclear facility like we have up in Northern Ohio. So it is a crisis that will breed opportunity, and that means jobs and additional cash flow for the residents of these rural areas and small towns.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, from my perspective, I'm a grandma. Okay, why is this so important to me? Would be my granddaughter, who is 3 years old. She is going to be impacted so much in terms of climate change. This is one of the reasons why I became a climate reality leader, because people need to be aware of the fact that there is a temperature rise in the earth that Dr. Enoch talked about. There is an issue with fresh potable water in the Cincinnati Butler area. If you have an airport, or if you have a military installation, there's a potential that if you get your water from the Ohio River, it has PFAS in it. And that means there's a lot that goes into cleaning up that water. And who pays for that? The taxpayers pay for that. And in Dayton, in the surrounding areas that use aquifers, there's still a need to move sometime intakes because of PFAS and other chemicals creating plumes inside of those aquifers. So for me, the reality is, I want my children to have a healthier environment than I have now. And I want to decrease, as a nurse, I want to decrease the incidence of asthma, because we know climate change is putting all of that, those allergens closer to the ground. So we end up with more allergies, more asthma with our children, and communities of color who have the coal plants, they end up with more cardiovascular issues and asthma. So to me, this is such an important discussion for the future of our nation, which is our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, and trying to get that environment as clean as possible, or at least stop the degradation that is occurring now. Thanks.
Thank you, Peggy. Bob, I know you were having some trouble with the connection. Are you able to respond to that question, or?
Yes, it's now working well, thank you. So I'm happy to go next. I've been a political activist my whole life. I'm in my late 70s. My education started at the war in Vietnam. So the way I see climate change impacting me in the short term is the things I'll know about: drought, flooding, extreme storms. These fires are going to be much widespread, not just in California, but it's a huge impact just at that level alone. Still a lot of consequences. I think we're approaching global catastrophe. I mean, we have migration problems now around the world that are just huge human disasters. And this is with relatively little climate change. So we're going to see continuous war on a new level. It's really bad. We don't somehow get a global political consensus on how to fix these things. And I don't see too many governments that are actually able to do that. Certainly not our current administration, and not even the previous ones that were, in my opinion, largely driven by big corporate money and very resistant to input of the kind that we've been talking about today. There are solutions. There are good solutions. There are solutions that would help a lot of people in a lot of ways, and they're being resisted all up and down the political system. So that's how I see the big picture.
Thank you all. Gosh, you've triggered a lot of thoughts for me. I was thinking the mention of the influence of corporations and how much money, and I'll say specifically greed, drives some of the political decisions and the legislative decisions that are being made for this country, and how they do not take in the well-being of the whole as an important and perhaps to me the most important issue to be considered when voting on these issues. And certainly, I think it's Senator Sheldon Whitehouse brought that home with his presentation at the hearing for Amy Coney Barrett. So in the context of the focus of the work that you do as it relates to climate and environment, what do you see the crossroads you face in continuing your efforts? What next for you? What direction, what crossroads, what possibilities for your work in the future do you see? Who would like to go first?
Well, I guess I could go first. And Tony Logan, once again, I think the biggest single crossroads is a kind of a slingshotting on what you were saying, Elaine, is that it's determining if we Americans, we Ohioans can muster the political will to treat climate change both as the crisis and the opportunity which it is. And we here in Ohio need really look than the horrendous corruption involved in the passage last year of House Bill 6, which was the nuclear and coal bailout bill ramrodded through the legislature last year in the General Assembly. In that case, the Republican Speaker of the House was arrested and charged by the FBI, along with a half dozen or so staffers, with charged with accepting bribes of some $40 million. And most of that seems to have been traceable to dark money, almost untraceable contributions from First Energy, which is the major electricity generator up in northern Ohio and into Pennsylvania. And those dark money contributions were basic to legislate money into the bottom line of First Energy. And we need to have the political will to throw bums like that out before it's too late, because climate change is not a problem that we can deal with it at some point in the future, put it on the shelf for now. We've got to get started, and we got to get started now, or as Peggy indicated, our children and grandchildren are going to have to deal with it in a much more existential fashion.
Thank you.
Well, since you just mentioned me, I'll continue that thought process. And I'm going to say, since Elaine, you didn't know what the new source methane legislation was about with the EPA. Prior to the current administration, the EPA and the Obama administration pushed caps on new sources of methane, where the wells would not be flared off the extra methane. I mean, you could light up 80,000 houses with the methane that is let loose in the atmosphere just in 24 hours. Right? So those new source rules were supposed to be instigated on federal property as well as throughout any place that, especially with fracking and drilling for gas. And it was passed, and then when the current administration came in, they started to decimate it, as well as clean water rules for profitability. Okay, so where I see this in terms of my efforts is just to continue to make transparent, the issues. Like with the State House, the House Bill 6, that thing's dead in the water. They're not going to do anything. And those assessments start in January, right, Tony?
Right,
No,
correct.
those assessments come out in January that John Q. Public is going to be paying on because they have not rescinded it. So there's going to be a lot that comes forth in the next lame duck sessions that we're going to have to like push with Governor DeWine, with the current House and Senate, to get that bill off the records because it's a dirty bill. So I'll be pushing on that.
So I guess I didn't realize they had not acted to stop that bill.
No, yeah.
So part of this reason for this call is I want to learn things that we can do now to begin helping bring environmental standards into play and help with that. So what actions could we, the audience and citizens, take right now that would maybe push them to rescind House Bill 6?
Write your senators, your representatives, and Governor DeWine. Okay. Write them and insist that they take that off the books. Vote November 3rd for anyone who took money from this dark money and
You mean
has
vote
not
against?
returned it.
Vote against.
Against
Vote
them.
them out.
Vote them out.
Okay.
The one thing I do like is that there's term limits for the Ohio House and Senate, and I really think we need to start pushing limits for our national House and Senate in order to not have them get in bed with these lobbyists that push oil and gas down people's throat when it really is. Oh gosh, it's all it's a limited resource,
Right.
and it's causing more pollution than we really need. So I'm going to stop because I get really excited about this. But right.
Oh, and don't forget about the Ohio Supreme Court, because many of the sitting members of the Supreme Court of Ohio have taken money from First Energy, and they eventually get a chance to review everything that comes out of the legislature. So there's another obstacle to progressive change into renewable energy right there as well. You have Supreme Court. I won't go into the United States Supreme Court, but we have the same problems there, kind of writ larger.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's thank you for bringing those issues to the front. Bob, did you have anything you wanted to contribute to this aspect?
Yes, I'm not good getting audio in, but if you can hear me, I'll proceed with some comments.
Okay.
In my professional work, I think the impact of climate change is basically the same as the impact on the other public health priorities and commitments, which has been inadequate for a long time. In terms of my political work, I've been active locally with the Sierra Club, and I'd like to describe one issue we've been working on, which I think is very relevant to this whole problem, and that is stormwater infrastructure in Cincinnati. Like all old cities with an archaic system where a lot of stormwater goes right into the sanitary sewer system, it overwhelms it. It's designed to overflow when that happens. That's called CSOs, combined sewer overflows. This means raw sewage gets into our steam, our backyards, our basements. There's some that have flooding routine with a heavy storm. And this has been a problem for years. Cincinnati is under a federal consent decree to fit under the Clean Water Act, about $4 billion. And the problem is It's being funded by very regressive rate structure.
You say that last part again. It's funded
It's
what?
being funded by a very regressive rate structure.
Ah, a recessive. Okay.
The planning and people spend every month on their water bill. Single-family residences are paying almost $500 a year for drinking water they use, which has nothing to do with stormwater. The problem is we need a regional stormwater management plan and implementation. It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's funded out of not drinking water use, but stormwater generation. Big cities pay more. Countries nothing because they use water, a lot of stormwater, dumping in the system. This problem is there for on both Democratic and Republican county commissions. They have used to address the basic underlying rate structure and how the lower half of the population is basically subsidizing industry and big institutions and large commercial operations. So this is an issue that everybody understands. I mean, if you the bills, something wrong. They don't see any political solutions coming under the current system, and it's just an obvious area where we as progressives can get out there and educate people about what the problem is and how it's easily fixed. And if we don't start talking to ordinary people about these kinds of problems, they're just going to end up giving up and going with Trump or whatever demagogue comes along who is not going to work for them. So that's my problem. That's my solution.
Thank you.
Well, you know, the other thing with that, Bob, is that water issues, water infrastructure issues abound not only in Cincinnati and in Ohio, but nationally. One of the things that I've been working on with freshwater use is to make sure everybody gets their water turned off in times of pandemic. Okay, we were really sending letters to the governor and to the Ohio Senate and House to keep those water faucets turned on, and hoping that was clean water, not having lead or PFAS in it. So yeah, it's going to be an ongoing issue if we don't create more accountability with chemical and industry to not dump their junk in our water.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, all that you're saying, Thomas, Vanessa's going to have to help me with Thomas's last name. He does a lot of research for us. and when Thomas, I asked him to do some research on the environment and climate change. And what he said, everything he was finding was saying that because of climate change, the areas that we're going to be hurt on are food, energy, and migration. Because as the ocean rises, the southern parts of this country the people in the south are going to have to migrate north. And we're not handling immigration well. I think we need to do some proactive review of our immigration policies and also to learn to prepare and adapt for the migration that is going to happen. But food and I will add water because I'm with you. That those are going to be two critical things we're going to notice right away. And as the population moves northward because of migration, those two are going to be really tight. And in fact, I was thinking of asking Tony the question. I've heard people that were interested. I have a Prius hybrid, so I operate on gas and electric. My generates electricity, but I have to have gas to put in the tank to keep that car running. Well, I know people like with the Tesla, it's all electric. How will they be able to charge their batteries? How will they be able to keep their cars going? And I wondered if solar energy could handle
Absolutely. Right. And I'm an EV, electric vehicle driver myself, Tesla. And there are so many ways of ensuring that your charging is being done with green renewable energy. Some of the utilities that are a little more forward looking and looking to participate in the profits that will come from a renewable green energy
right.
are making clean energy or check a box for clean energy on your or Duke Energy, whatever, and then they ensure that they bring in enough clean energy to serve your account, and then the proliferation of rooftop solar makes it very easy for every household to be not only charged with renewable energy at your home, but eventually we're going to have interactive charging where your electric vehicle will be a storage facility, and you can be under contract with the local utilities to provide that power to other people if you're not driving your car, for example. So much exciting stuff going on there, and but we do need more clean energy initiatives at the federal and state level to make sure they happen. As House Bill 6 shows us, there are red forces trying to back into the carbon world every day,
Right.
and we've got to take it seriously and stick it to these folks, because given the chance, they'll continue the dirty portfolio that we have now.
Okay, well, a great discussion on that. For me, I don't see why Tesla doesn't put solar panels on their cars, or any car manufacturer doesn't make solar panels that directly create electricity for the cars to run. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be simple. However, again, Elaine, when you mention food and migration, they're not only going to be traveling north, they're going to be traveling in, because places on the east and west coast and southern coast are going to be inundated with water. And I keep telling my son, who's in Savannah, move, okay? move now. So you're not an immigrant in your own country trying
Right.
to find someplace to live.
Yeah.
Yeah. And likewise, Michigan's looking really good right now.
Yeah.
Other than their water issues in Detroit. So
Right.
this is an ongoing thing. We're going to have to be able to revitalize how we grow our food. We're going to have to revitalize our water infrastructure.
Right.
We're going to have to look at, and I'm really involved in something called Reimagine Appalachia. That's on the other side of Ohio,
Right.
which is the southeast side. And they want to develop broadband in that area because they don't even have broadband, which puts them behind the eight ball as far as education and innovation is concerned. So there's a lot of things that have been ignored for so long.
Right.
That if we don't start working on it now,
Yeah.
It's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We have neglected our infrastructure seriously. I do not cross the Brent Spence Bridge. I'll just say that, because it is so old, and they won't replace it. So, and I think Tony can speak to for the farming community. They too struggle with access to broadband and dependable Wi-Fi.
Sure.
So
that's a major problem.
I am currently reading a book to a Sustainable Future, which is by Patricia DeMarco,
Okay.
that talks about what you can do in terms of Pittsburgh, the inner city, and how we can make sustainable changes. And really, that's the most important thing, is to make sure that whatever you put in place is sustainable.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely, and you're hitting on a lot of things that I have myself wrestled with, how we spend so much money extending oil wells and deep diving into the ocean floor and those kinds of things, when it's a limited resource. It is a limited resource. Give it up, find something else, kind of thing. So, Bob, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or should I just move on to the next question?
Yeah, back on the question of stormwater management, I just like to point out that there's some positive aspects to it aside from the rate structure. Stormwater actually should be an asset, not something we're trying to get rid of. There's lots of ways we can retain that water, make it part of our urban infrastructure that's good. We can have daylighted streams that are now in sewers with walking paths, with bike paths, with all kinds of like that lots of people would really benefit from. And for the first time, they would see positive environmental consequences to the policies that we're advocating.
Thank you.
So I just want to throw that out.
Yeah, no, thank you. I live within walking distance of the Great Miami River, and I totally think that we need to open up our streams more and let sunshine help clean some of the water, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's great. So the next question I have is, and we've talked about this some, but really, if anything were possible, so there were nothing holding us back, what next steps? Because this is for me and those listening. I want to know what I can do. So we've talked about reaching out to in particular around House Bill 8, reaching out to our legislators and letting them know we want it gone and we don't want any of our tax money going to that starting in January. And other issues that we can look at, that we can participate in. But I wondered, if anything possible, what big and small steps do you think that we could do locally and also as a country that would help improve our environment? And what I think is the other piece that we talk about, how are we going to adapt as the climate changes more and more? How do we prepare for that and equip ourselves? Because I think what I hear from politicians is they're trying to take us back to a time that, I'm 72. It never really looked like that back then. So
Sorry.
so I just saying, my daughter said, my mom told me it wasn't really that great back then. So make America great again is not a true statement. We've never lived up to our possibility. We are a promise made that has never been fulfilled. And so my question becomes, what can we do to prepare for a future where those possibilities become a reality? And how do we learn to adapt? Really, we have to adapt. That's the difference between our becoming extinct or having a future for our grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, and all the children. So I'd be curious if you have given any thought to what next steps, big and small, that we as individuals can take, or what organizations we could become part of to help support the work they're doing.
I'm going to take this first because I look at this from a personal perspective, as well as a community perspective, and then from organizational or government perspective. Okay, I look at all three. That's from a personal perspective. Learn to grow your own food. Okay, forget that beautiful lawn. All right, we don't need to have a beautiful green lawn. Put food in the lawn. Okay, that's your lawn. Reduce your plastic intake. Now, as we go from using gas and oil and all gas vehicles down to electric vehicles, those oil and gas companies are really trading on that value that we're going to be using plastic, which is a commodity, and they're trying to create cracking plants along the Ohio River, which will further impede our drinking water. Okay, so personally, get rid of your plastics. Something nobody ever thinks about is shampoo bottles. I know we're impacting an industry there that makes those shampoo bottles, but bar shampoo is much better. Don't take straws. Encourage your shopping centers to let you use your bags even within a pandemic. Just load my grocery, I'll load the bag in the car, or let you load it into your own bags. That's some small things on a personal level. Community, get involved. I'm not saying run for government, and Dr. Enoch, I am so proud of you for running for office as a woman, as a person of color. I think that's wonderful. I am a League of Women Voters member, obviously, and my goal is to understand the issues so I can discuss those issues and what's good and bad about a bill. I don't attack people. I attack the bills.
Right.
So from a community standpoint, look at what you can do to help build up your community. Thirdly, government. House bill X. Wow. League, our energy lobbyists really worked hard to say what a bad bill it was. Okay, especially where it was beating up solar and wind in the same bill. Get involved. Again, vote November 3rd. Secondly, learn the issues and write to your senators and representatives. Get them on a Zoom call and discuss the issues with them. Okay, get them on the phone. I can't do person to person right now. I look horrible in this, but get involved. I mean, before the pandemic, I don't know how many times I flew to Washington with certain groups. Wow. Get involved, get your face out there, and make a difference, because it wasn't that great back then, but it can be great if we all work towards that same goal and not be so divided. Okay, I could talk a lot, but I'm going to let everybody else talk.
I'd like to hear other perspectives and other ideas. Tony or Bob, would you have something to contribute?
Well, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I'd like to really see a two-pronged effort, if that's not being greedy, to answer your question. The first would be to accelerate the conversion of our electric generation from coal and natural gas to clean renewable energy, solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, and then with newer technologies like hydrogen as they come online. And then second, I believe we need to begin a kind of a moonshot program of sequestering atmospheric carbon into our soils and woodlots. Really, the quickest way to accomplish this sort of goal would be to develop a market for carbon, one where farmers and forest managers can be paid for sequestering carbon, just like they're being paid for corn and soybeans today. And we're starting to see some support at the state legislative level of promoting sustainable soil and land use management and soil health. These are based on the underlying assumption that we need more carbon in the soil and less in the atmosphere. Right now, I was on a program with Ohio State, or a YouTube, where Dr. Ratan Law, who just received the World Food Prize, was featured for some of his work that was done in carbon management and sequestration. Apparently most soils, I'm not a chemist, but most soils have lost between 25 and 75% of their original soil carbon.
Wow.
So there's been this degradation of soils, over the past 150 years. And soils in subtropical regions, it was indicated that the ideal amount of soil in the root zone for a plant is about 2%, and many of those soils are down to like 0.1% carbon. So we need less carbon in the atmosphere and more in the soils. And now markets are beginning to emerge for paying farmers to store carbon in their soils through various programs. And an actual program comes online in California in 2020. These are things that we can be looking at today, but there's also a lot of very promising technology to sort of answer Peggy's purported her question on plastics. We have plant-based plastics now, and they are they are very close to being economic, and of course they have such insurmountable environmental benefits versus petroleum-based plastics. Many of them grade within 10 days when they hit water or the environment. But we must, as we're going forward on these two initiatives, to converting to clean renewable energy and doing more to sequester carbon in our soil, these must be done with an overlay of racial justice. I mean, we have to quit as a society citing these dirty energy infrastructure and fabrication facilities in communities of color. That more important, we need to make sure those communities of color are made part of a national expanse of solar and other forms of renewable energy, with jobs in assembling solar panels and installing solar panels, and businesses where they're selling solar panels into the society at large. So as we move forward on these two initiatives, hopefully we can keep racial justice in mind, because it's been a long time coming for many of these communities.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bob, you have anything
That's
to
a
add?
good point. In fact, just in terms of the restructure for water and sewer in Cincinnati, the big impact there of the regressive aspect of it is on low-income families. So it's a big issue for people of color, especially. Another issue we've been dealing with here, and I'm speaking with a volunteer with the Sierra Club, is mass transit. And we've been successful in doing things like stopping new freeways from cutting across the city, and we're trying to promote mass transit. I think the big problem here for all of us is developing a political strategy that is capable of getting where we want to get to. So, for example, with transit, we had an election where the people of Cincinnati and Hamilton County agreed to increase funding for the public transportation system, sort of. And it was based on an increase in the sales tax. Well, that's the most regressive kind of tax there is. We live in a city that is just rolling in corporate money, and these same companies are complaining that their workers can't get to work. And what do? The Chamber of Commerce says, okay, let's make the people pay for this problem. And unfortunately, most of the liberal groups agreed with that. They went along with it, including the Sierra Club. Instead of asking, why aren't corporations kicking in a large part of that cost? Why is it that Seattle can put a tax on Google and Microsoft and those guys, and we can't? So we really need to have a bigger political strategy, how to go after these guys. And in terms of people that are in office and then talking to them, my position is it's already too late. That those folks, for the most part, got into office because they were being backed by the wrong forces, the wrong sources of wealth. We really need to focus on candidates that are putting forward a new progressive outlook. And that's how we get to have candidates in office that'll listen to us.
Thank you. Thank you. So Tony, I have one question before I move on. So how do you get carbon into the soil?
Well, it's kind of easier than it sounds, because if you take an acre out of monoculture and put it in forestry, for example, you have so much more of a root system established. In historical times now, and these sequester soils for hundreds and hundreds of years. But there are also ways, some very exciting new technologies that will eventually allow us, I believe, to replace the synthetic fertilizers that are being used by farmers now with natural organic fertilizers. And Bob mentioned municipal water treatment plants, but that's just one area. Also, factory farm manure retention. We can use manures and sanitary waste and others, just almost any kind of biomass, and use technologies, thermodynamic type technologies to take away the pathogens in those and turn them into organic fertilizers with components that are both short-term carbon so that the plant can uptake it, and long-term carbon that stays in the soil for thousands of years. And there's a lot of new technologies that are coming online. We have to help the farmers adopt those, and we certainly hope that they will keep an open mind for those sort of new technologies. And I think the harmful algae blooms that have been occurring annually in Lake Erie's West Basin is about all the proof you need that something's got to change. And so organic fertilizers that will bind carbon in the soil rather than allowing runoff is one good place to start.
Thank you.
I would add to that there's a great show on Netflix called Kiss the Dirt.
I just saw that.
Isn't that a good movie? It talks about how to do carbon capture, and that the old ways of planting that our farmers were using and tilling the soil and everything breaks down that soil instead of retains the nutrients, and that how to keep the ground covered instead of bare will help us increase or decrease loss of soil. So Tony, I like the idea, all the ideas you presented, but I will tell you, I've had people downwind of those and they do not like the smell.
Yes.
And one of the things is with agriculture, they have tried to modify how they fertilize. Unfortunately, they were not prepared for the torrential rains that have occurred with climate change.
Sure.
And so now things have to change again so we don't have those toxic algae blooms. I work both ends of the state. I do the freshwater future, which is Lake Erie, as well as the Ohio River Valley, because I want to keep my water safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. To just amplify that a little bit, true experts that have been analyzing these harmful algae blooms in Lake Erie and elsewhere, who have researched it, know that there's a combination of factors, but because there is runoff from untreated livestock waste and synthetic fertilizers, high nitrogen, but all of those factors are brought together and brought to a boil because of climate change. So we've got to not only change the fertilization techniques that are used in those regions, but we need to slow or mitigate climate change to fully correct that problem. And it's going to take decades to do it.
So we have to adapt.
Yeah, we start now.
As Anne Frank said, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world.
Yes.
Let's not wait a single moment.
Yeah. Let's doable right now,
Right
kind
now.
of thing.
And,
Yeah,
and
thank you so
sometimes what's doable is just the personal level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, do what's doable right now. So Vanessa or Bob, do you have anything to add before I move into what I call the doubts and reservations conversation? Okay, all right, thank you, thank you. Well, I know for me, uh-oh, I don't know what happened. Am I gone? I don't know why my video stopped. All right, I'm back. So I know for me, I just have to own up to the fact that I'm an old Girl Scout. I was in scouting for 10 years, all through second grade, through high school. Was, how with scout also. So I have 15 years of scouting in my background. So this whole environmental thing is really an important thing to me. I'm a bit of a geek or nerd around talking about it, and childhood memories of making mud pies and going to my grandmother's in Kentucky and going up the hill to get water out of the well and filling up the pails of water and bringing them back down. So I do remember those days and how precious all of our resources are and how the water. So I really, really have enjoyed what you all have shared so far. So saying all this, I'd also be curious to know, what are your doubts and reservations about our capacity as individuals and as a country to adapt and change and begin really accelerating our efforts instead of it just being a nice idea or a nice thing to do, or those people do it. We all have to engage, is how I feel. So I'd be curious to know, what are your doubts and reservations?
Well, I'll start off. This is Tony again. I think our incumbent or present day electric companies and generators and the fossil fuel companies have way too much power in our current political system. And this is a recurring theme in today's town hall, because both Bob and Peggy have also alluded to this, and certainly Dr. Enoch. Many times they've used that their political muscle and power to capture the very regulatory agencies that are supposed to be holding them to account. Heck, the Trump administration installed a coal lobbyist to run their EPA. I mean, talk about a swamp creature. But unless we send a new generation of leaders to Washington, to Columbus, all of these lofty climate change goals that we have are meaningless. I mean, if we just continue to send corporate funded climate change deniers to Congress and to the Ohio legislature, nothing's going to change except atmospheric carbon levels,
Right.
and our ability to mitigate them in time to save future generations. So that's certainly my biggest reservation as we move forward on this.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll
Peggy,
go next to Bob.
okay, sure, Bob.
So the concern is whether or not we can even recover from our current situation. And the reason I say is many people in our society now reject science. They even reject evidence. If evidence is presented, it doesn't matter. In fact, the very concept of truth is now in question.
Right.
So that's a big problem. That means we can't talk our way out of this. And unless we can figure out ways to connect with the 40% of our population that is in that boat, we're in big trouble. And so what that leads me to is, again, focusing on local issues that don't require proof. I mean, the water bill in Cincinnati doesn't require proof. Everybody gets it.
Mhm.
And the flooding and so forth. These are very concrete things that we don't have to prove. And these are the kinds of issues that we have to learn how to deal with. Otherwise, we're never going to win these people back. And we won't solve problems.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Bob that you think local, and then just like that drop of water that ripples out, you think local, drop of water, ripples out, you do it better, somebody else is going to try to adapt it because you've done it better. Actually, I'm going to maybe digress. My research that I did as for my PhD was on workplace bullying or violence to aggression in the workplace, which I think sometimes I tend to overemphasize that some bills, some government laws are actually aggression against the people that they are supposed to serve. So I would again, as with Bob, say think local and show that it works. But secondly, I would continue to make noise. Again, call, write, Twitter, put your views out there, kind of like what I'm doing right now. You know, we're talking about it, and it's important to talk about. But as I said, I think that as we get a more gentle form of government that is not narcissistic or sadistic, so will everybody else treat each other with more empathy and respect. And that's what I would like our leadership to have, because everybody looks to leadership as to how we set our culture and tone. And so that is what we need now, because we're all going to have to work together in order to make this work and not make everybody think,
Right.
you know, there are other solutions that really aren't there.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and certainly I have my doubts and reservations, which mirror a lot of what you all have shared. But I also have hope because I believe that how I choose to show up in the world makes a difference. And so I am grateful that my passion has been to build community and connections. And wherever I show up in the world, even if it's at Costco and the checkout line, I challenge stereotypes and begin to model that world that I want us to live into, where we care about each other and empathy is shown. And I think that that's one thing. But is with the environment, I, as an individual, know what I can do in my house, in my yard, in my neighborhood, and I can act accordingly to create the neighborhood that I want to live in. So I thank you for that. One last quick question before I turn the mic back over to Dr. Vanessa, and that is, I'd be curious to know and invite you to reflect on what we've talked about so far, the conversation that we have and shared today. What has been the gift of these conversations? Maybe something that surprised you or touched you in some way. And if you'd like to share that, if there's someone who has specifically said something that was meaningful for you, if you would just name them and do that. I will start with, I'm grateful that all three of you accepted my invitation to be on today's call. I'm sad that Bob's sound system wasn't perfect, so I think we may have missed some things from you, Bob, but I'm grateful that you've persevered and hung in there with us. And it's been a gift to learn what you've shared about what's happening in Cincinnati and with the water and how we can deal with that. And Peggy, the work that you're doing and continue to do with raising awareness and advocating for clean air and clean water. I really appreciate that. And you're talking about doing it for your grandchild. It really resonates for me, because it's all about the future generation. And the Girl Scout in me wants to always leave a place better than I found it. And so I am striving to do that, and I appreciate that you're doing that. And Tony, I learned from you last time, and this time even more. This was a bigger platform for you to talk about your passion for renewable energy and food,
Right.
what we need to do for the food market. And so learning that from you was really a gift for me. And so I'm grateful, grateful all that you have shared. And I would ask all of you, if you have resources, whether it's organizations that you work with or know of that would be beneficial for people if they want to tap into, whether it's working with air or water or local taxes or those kinds of things, or the farm and the food, that we could make those information, those links available to people so that they can move to action, not just listen to what we've talked about here today, but I want people to move to action. And so I'm really grateful. And so I wondered if anyone else was, what the gift of today's conversation was for you, or what maybe surprised you about how the conversation played out versus what you thought it was going to be. So.
I really appreciate everybody's knowledge. Bob and I are similar, and I'm a member of the Sierra Club too. And I do some things with them, but a lot of my stuff is with the League of Women Voters. And like I said, I encourage people to join those organizations that really touch them. Sierra Club, League of Women Voters, the Ohio Environmental Council, Reimagine Appalachia, Freshwater Future. I will send you a list of those, okay?
Yeah,
With their
thank you.
links,
Thank
okay?
you. Yes, yes.
And I think Tony's been awesome in talking about stuff too. I'm really grateful that you gave me a platform to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
shucks, I'm flattered by that, Peggy, because I've learned so much from you in this discussion. And one of the big takeaways I get from this, from all the participants and from Dr. Enoch is the wide range of activities and technologies that are going to be needed to address this problem of climate change in the environment. I mean, obviously there's green energy, renewable energy, but also, as Bob pointed out, our failing water utility infrastructure is exacerbating the problem as well. And we need to look at other forms of environmental degradation. The plastics problem that Peggy pointed out, there's vast swaths of the oceans now that are covered in discarded plastics, and it's
Right.
it's both a crisis and a challenge. I think there's probably some business opportunities to the first person that invents a ship that can go in and vacuum that out and make something usable out of it, or get it out of the oceans, for example. But I've also, I think we've also talked about it. There's kind of a great unrest in Ohio and in the country today about the status quo in our energy choices. And many of us have talked about House Bill 6, and we should have. We're a national embarrassment. I mean, I'm like a lot of you. I listen to podcasts, national podcasts, and energy and other topics, and they just think it's horrendous. But we've our politics to be into here in Ohio, and then there's a whole media, both television, talk radio, and worse yet, some of these goofy climate internet sites that make climate denial possible and try to buck up candidates that are anti-science and that are climate change deniers, and make their political careers possible. And in a world where we all honored science, that wouldn't be the case. But it's a reality we have to deal with, at least now. But I've had a great time hearing some of the other insights from our fellow panelists, and I'm abidingly optimistic about what's going to happen here in this election cycle. But we all need to apply ourselves. Everyone said it in one way or the other. Get out and vote, damn it. And then you have the right to complain if you don't get your way. But if you don't vote, you can't complain. But and thank you so much, Elaine, for what you've done. And I would like to kind of put the spotlight on a couple of initiatives. One is Ohio State University is just opening a carbon management and sequestration center. And as I mentioned, Dr. Ratan Law is a major actor in that. And as the name suggests, they're going to be looking at nothing other than carbon management and sequestration as it applies to agriculture and other industries and livelihoods throughout the state. And the second is that the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association is working with other in space on legislation to be introduced in the Ohio General Assembly on soil health, and something that would be the basic framework for a possible state program to incentivize carbon sequestration and storage among farmers. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and I'm glad and learning more every day, and more determined than ever to make these aspirations into reality. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Well, I see we've had some links posted in the chat. So if you're on the call right now, you'll see those links. I see my cousin Ruth, who's a biologist and a researcher, has shared the Ohio Research Interest Group. So people might want to check that out. I'm not sure what all their interests are, but that would be a good one. And then Peggy has put a whole list of different organizations that we will capture also and make sure that they're loaded other places to make available to people. And I'm really grateful. Bob, did you have anything you would like to add?
Yes, this has been a very impressive, comprehensive, and insightful conversation. When you asked about doubts, I was kind of negative, but I'd like to put a positive as well. And that is, in past decades, half of our population has not voted. And I think that's because they weren't seeing anybody working for them at the political level. That means there's a big population out there and talk to, many of whom will like our ideas. A lot of people, even people that have been sucked into the Trump organization, you know, if you scratch the surface, they have the same complaints we have about
Yes.
a lot of things. So there's, I think, lots of possibilities there. And this kind of organization that we're dealing with at this level, I think, is really important.
Thank you.
So thanks for doing it.
Thank you for showing up. People underestimate how important it is to show up, but showing up and exercising your voice is really important, and voting. So I think I appreciate all that you've shared, and now I'll turn the mic over to Dr. Vanessa Enoch to bring us to a close, and also take any Q&A that may have come up that we've missed. That's right. That's true.
Uh-oh.
Well, I just, again, I've been worrying about the climate and our environment.
I think Elaine may have closed us all the way out. So everyone, thanks again for joining us, and we will go ahead and end this broadcast right now. Have a wonderful weekend and get to the polls between now and November 3rd. Thanks again. Bye-bye.